names.
Awesome. Gail Robertson, welcome to the show. We've so for everybody who's just listening, we've been talking for about 35 minutes. But we've had a really interesting conversation and I'm excited to see where else this goes. So we were talking about prepping military band euphonium auditions and how it can be really a bit destructive because you spend all this time preparing. I mentioned that I was practicing 6, 7 hours a day. She mentioned that her student was prepping 7 to 8 hours a day, and like we didn't get invited to finals, no feedback. It's brutal. But the point I was going to make is I think there's a turning point in um, the career aspirations of young euphonium players where like military band really isn't on the radar for them anymore, and I think that's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, like for instance, like I mentioned earlier, anyone that's going to practice 7 or 8 hours a day, you're you're thinking that doing another hour, maybe I should do 9 hours a day, or maybe I should
Yeah.
do 10. You're driving yourself to the point of probably going crazy over it.
Hmm.
I can't imagine having 8 hours of practice in one day. I've never done that in my career, even when I've
Yeah.
had recordings. So I feel like what happens when you put that much time into it, you're like, you're going to be even more disappointed when you don't get there because you've
Yeah.
devoted so much. And then you feel like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I didn't practice enough. I don't know that more is always, doing more time is always better. I just
Yeah.
think that, focus of maybe 2 hour practice, and being super focused and just trying to really
Yeah.
do that. That way you're not feeling guilty if you don't get invited because you didn't devote your life for a month. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, one of the lessons I've had a really hard time learning until this semester was something I heard Sam Plafian say. He said something like, is that some master class when I was an undergrad? He said, if you're having to practice more than 2.5 hours a day, you need to get better at sight reading.
Yeah, okay, I can totally agree with that. I can
Yeah,
totally agree with that because I mean, when I'm learning, when I'm prepping for recitals and stuff like that, I'm not someone who wants to work 6 months in advance. I would be so
yeah,
sick of that music. I would be so over it. I'm a person who's going to start really cranking it on about 4 or 5 weeks before,
yeah,
and then I know I pace it that way. But I'm not doing 7 hours ever. Like I mean,
yeah.
I just that's not going to help me play it better. I
Mhm.
think what makes me play something better is repetitive sessions. So like
Yeah,
if I play and I work on something new today and it's Monday or today's Saturday, then I better run through it either later on this evening what I was shedding, or I need to do it tomorrow.
yeah,
If I don't shed what I did yesterday or today, tomorrow, then pretty much a lot of it's going to be a wash.
yeah,
And I don't know if that's for everybody, but for me, if I play again the next day and the next day, you can see progress and you can feel it. If I'm playing 7 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 7 hours a day,
yeah,
I don't know that I'm going to see the progress.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've
If
tried
you see
to,
someone every single day of the week, we don't notice if they've lost weight or not lost weight, right?
yeah,
But if you only see them once a month, you can tell. So I feel like I think that playing all the time, I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. My thought on that is I would be so burnt out with it, but everyone is
yeah.
different.
Yeah, I've tried to really embrace the idea of using rest as a way of catapulting progress. It's not an all the time thing. It's a you need to know when you need to rest thing. And I think part of that is like having the discipline to be able to keep the separation of like, okay, I done my 2 hours for today. Maybe I didn't get to this excerpt, but I need to prioritize that one tomorrow. And this actually comes back. Lance LeDuc talks about this where I think it's a music practice coach. He brings in Flow from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, where he's talking about how like if you're optimizing for flow and the mental gains that you make on a single day, you shouldn't have like if you want to make sure that the electrical signals in your neurons are continuing to insulate exponentially, you can't skip more than one day of the same excerpt. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I think a lot of people live in guilt too. That instead of feeling good about
yeah,
their progress, they're feeling bad because they didn't practice yesterday. And you know what
yeah.
I mean? Like, if
That's
there's
not
something
helpful
you
at
really
all.
want to do, yeah, I'm just saying, but if you really want to do this and then
Mhm,
you didn't get to do it, you can't beat
mhm.
yourself up too much. I mean,
Yeah,
people have asked me, like, I'll do a clinic with somebody, and then 10 years later, they'll ask me, and they're going, oh my God, you have the same dang energy you had when I met you 20 years ago. How do you do
yeah,
it? You got to know when to say no. But
yeah,
and the other thing is you got to do other things. Like, I don't know. I wanted to practice yesterday. I got to school and I got a phone call, sabotage my workout. Then I had to go to my piano rehearsal, Then I went to my
Mm,
office to practice. Students were in my office, so it's like, dang it, packed my bag up. I went and I worked out. Then I went home and I was so tired. I thought, and I didn't practice what I wanted to yesterday. But
yeah,
I'm not going to beat myself up today,
yeah,
because otherwise, I think that's what happens. But my point is, if you really want to do something and you don't want to mess it up, do it first thing in the morning.
yeah,
I always go to the gym early. I always do that, and then I always get to my office early. Those are my practice things.
yeah.
Because by the end of the day, man, someone's on my office is like popular hang. I guess I don't know. I mean, it's like this year seems like more than ever. They want to just come by to say hi. And it's nice, but I can't hardly practice at school. My mistake is I park my car. I get there early, so I get the good spot. So they'll call and they'll send a text. Dr. Robertson, you still here? You know darn well they're standing by my car. You know. But I think, if you want to really, really practice for those things, I think pacing is
Mm,
important. I think, make it build it in the time that you'll get your lesson done or your practice done that's going to be productive. And if that means super early in the morning or late at night. And I just bought a tuner metronome, even though I have the stuff on my phone,
mm,
because I don't want to look at my tuner and someone texts. So,
yeah,
I think that, trying to get yourself away from all the distractions is helpful. So
I
I
think
brought
so
my horn
too.
home. My horn is here at the house. No one's going to bother me here. It's
Yeah,
here, and I don't like to practice at my house. But I know today, impossible.
yeah. That's one thing I've really tried to do this year too, is really like devote the optimal amount of focus to the time I spend on the horn, especially this semester. I had a couple lessons with Dave Federley in January. That's like all we talked about was, okay, how do we decrease the air pressure going into the horn so that the sound opens? And how do you have the most amount of focus in a short amount of time? Because I mean, grad school is really busy, so you don't have time to practice a zillion hours a day, even though you might want to.
Yes, but grad school's not nearly as busy as like the real life.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, this isn't something you'd know. I taught fifth grade math for a little while. I've like been a
Oh,
professional instrument
cool.
technician. I took about 4 years between my bachelor's and my master's degree.
So you know.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Well, I tell my students, the busier you are now, the better, because then you'll be used to that.
Yeah,
I think the master's degree is kind of the easiest degree. You'd
yeah,
only have 9 credits a semester. It feels easy after doing all the mess you have to do with gen eds, but you
yeah,
don't have to be in the marching band, so your time is your time. But
yeah,
the problem is people don't know how to manage all that free time.
yeah.
They've got so much free time that you don't know where to go. And I'm someone who likes structure. I like a schedule. When the end
Me
of the
too.
semester hits, Gail is not happy because
Yeah,
I don't know what to do with all that time. So I'm riding the bike somewhere, I'm doing this, and I'm like, what, it's like I go kind
yeah,
of crazy with too many things that I want to do, that I almost feel like I don't get anything done because I can't decide what I like. The order when my schedule comes out and I get all the students, who's on Monday at 8, who's at 9, I
yeah.
always feel like a sense of ease and calm.
Yeah, the problem I have is like I have a break that'll hit and I'll say like, "Oh, I'll have like a zillion hours to do everything every day. I can write a 10-minute piece for band in 2 weeks."
Yeah,
No, I can't. But I'll convince myself like, oh, that's more than enough time. And
but you
the way I'm
could if
gonna do
you
it is
really wanted to.
I'm gonna roll. Well, this is kind of the point I'm making. It's like I'll roll out like because I love structure too. And in a break, I'll like roll out of bed at 6 a.m. every day. I'll go work out immediately. I'll come home. I'll write for 4 hours. I'll go to work and then I'll come back. I'll eat dinner. I'll practice and I'll go hang with my girlfriend and go to bed. And it's like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, that's a great day, but it like it adds up after a while. And then I'll be on like day 13 and I'm like, wow, this 10-minute piece is like bad.
Yeah, I
And so
don't know.
it's just
I think I'm
I
kind of
find
like you.
personally, yeah, I find personally I
It
just
sounds
need to
like
be
my
more
day is like
realistic with
yours.
my time. Like I think things take a little longer than I want to convince myself that they do.
Well, I don't like to rush writing something. I have to be in the right frame, the right time of it. And sometimes it's just I'm laying there and I'm thinking about, okay, get up, and then I know exactly what I want to do, and I just go right at it. And I can write
Yeah.
2 or 3 minutes worth of music in that first session, and then I get to a cadence or somewhere in there, and then I put it aside, and then I'm still thinking about it, and I've already know what then the next time
Yeah.
I sit down, I know what I want to do. Like I'm writing a 12 tone row piece for one of my students he's a computer guy by day, and his name is Greg Lindstrom. He does that, and then he comes and takes lessons at UCA, and then his love is the tuba, but his job is that. So I'm writing this piece called The Code Cracker, and
That's awesome.
Gail never writes 12-tone toe stuff,
Hmm.
12-tone row stuff, but it's the coolest 12-tone row ever. And
That's
it
awesome.
swings boom ba do ba dee ba do ba do ba do ba da.
Yeah.
And that's a 12-tone row. And so I already been writing that in my head for weeks. I haven't finished it because somebody's got a recital coming up that I need to write something for them. So
Mhm.
that piece is still right here, ready to go. But it's I don't know. This my goal today and tomorrow is to finish those two pieces if I can.
Yeah. I always
I don't know
found
who's gonna hijack me with Super Bowl whatever mess, and who knows. But
I
I'm
always
gonna try
found
really hard.
I always found 12 tone music kind of writes itself. And the first time I really reckoned with that, I was working on this jazz chart, and they want 12 tone jazz chart. And one of the things I thought about was, well, if I use enough extensions, I can get all 12 tones in the harmony. And then I just use the notes in the harmony or the melody over like the chords it fits in the harmony. And then it will always sound nice, even though it's 12 tone. That's kind of cool. And
Yeah, I'm
then,
writing just a solo unaccompanied thing, but
yeah,
I'm already imagining that would be cool with lots of extensions.
yeah,
Yeah, I want to
and
hear that.
yeah, and so the idea, like, my writing process is a little weird. I was telling, we have the University of Illinois conducting symposium going on right now. So I played 5 hours of band standards yesterday. It was so much fun. But I was talking with one of the conductors about my composition process after, like, at the hang, and uh, the way I described it was I just tried to eliminate as many choices that I have to make as possible, because then the piece becomes really easy to write. It becomes like a wacky, complex puzzle that I have to solve. And the art is how I make the interesting music out of all of the limitations I've crafted. And it makes writing like really easy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I wonder, everyone, I mean, I remember going to women's brass conferences and like I facilitated the composers forum, and ask questions. And so I would ask each one of them, and everyone has a different process,
Mhm.
and everyone does things in a different way. There's a lot of people that are composers that have learned that or they studied it through academia and they've done like this class and they've taken all that. I don't know about you, but I
Mhm.
only had one semester of lessons with composition. During
Mhm.
my doctorate, I studied with Ricardo Lorenz, but I've
Wow.
never studied or anything like that. I'm more self-taught. I've listened, I've transcribed. I feel
Mhm.
like I've studied with the best composers out there because during my years of playing out at Disney, I transcribed stuff by Nat King Cole for tuba quartet,
That's awesome.
stuff that was by, all the Danny Elfman stuff. I mean, I know John Williams, Danny Elfman like nobody's business because I didn't get a
Yeah.
piano score or get something from the internet.
But you
It was all
listen.
transcribed, and so
Yeah.
we've learned in a different way. I don't use a piano when I compose where all these other trained composers for the Women's Brass Conference were talking about, oh, I studied composition when I was 7 and blah, and I'm
Mhm.
like, and me and Barbara York was there too because Barbara York was saying how she hated school.
Yeah.
She quit school because she didn't like all the 12 tone mess. She said
Mhm.
that was not her and she didn't want to do it. They would go
Yeah.
drinking instead.
Yeah. So my bachelor's degree is in composition and euphonium, and then like my master's degree is technically euphonium performance and literature, but because like the way master's degrees are structured, there's so many electives, like all of
Yeah,
my electives are composition classes. So it's
good.
kind of a double degree. And like so I've taken composition lessons. I go to the composer forum every week. I took orchestration, well, advanced orchestration. That was an awesome class. And then I'm in jazz composition seminar this semester, which is cool. That class has pushed me as a composer in a way I never thought. And part of it is because like I mean like as a euphonium player, I don't have the greatest amount of experience with jazz, but like the projects that we'll get will be like sometimes it's just you need to turn in 5 tunes next week. And
Yeah,
you only have to bring the lead sheets, but it's 5 tunes. And so
I would do
this
that. I love that class.
oh yeah, I mean like well, and that's one of the things I've
I can
really
write you
learned.
one right now. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah,
would
I
do
mean,
that.
like I can do a pretty like especially if I think about the harmony first and then build the melody after it. I can do a tune in probably 40 minutes. I can do a reasonably good tune with a pretty clean lead sheet in about 40 minutes. And one of the things I've really appreciated about that is like it's really honed the fundamentals of my writing because like so many composers now are so focused on the textural components in the soundscape that like they lose some of the general audience appeal of a lot of music, which is a singable melody or really interesting harmonic structure or superimposition of the two. And I think that having a toolbox that is a well-rounded menagerie of all of those things is what makes a really strong composer. And this is actually a really great time, I think, to transition to talking about some of the content of your paper, because I had a really good time reading that the other day. And one of the things I was coming away with and that it made me think about was I think one of the problems with music school right now is that people who primarily write chamber and orchestral music are the people who teach arranging and orchestration. And so uh,
They don't know what we do they?
no, they don't. And fundamentally, and I was having a conversation with a couple of people about this semester. We played this symphony for band by a very famous orchestral composer. It's like one of his first pieces for wind ensemble. And the thing that we kept saying is like, this music. This music is really high quality. It's very obvious that like he's an incredible composer, but you can really tell this is his first piece for band. And I think a lot of that is a fundamental lack of understanding of the history of the medium. And I didn't
What
have
the
a
role of the instruments are,
yes, and
but that's all
how
gotten ruined.
how how orchestra and band are very different mediums. The analogy I've started using with the undergrad composers here that I get into conversations with a lot is orchestral music is painting, band music is ceramics. And the reason I describe it that way is in when you're writing for orchestra, the strings are kind of the canvas or the texture of the paint that you add color to with the winds and percussion. Versus in the wind ensemble, you need to be able to make texture and color with the same instruments.
True.
And so having something that's three-dimensional, you have a little more to play with in the orchestra because you have an extra timbre. So you really have four layers instead of three. And in the wind ensemble, you really have three, unless you really start to split hairs with it. But that's the art of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think uh, like uh, and the thing that struck me in your paper was like talking about how the role of the euphonium has diminished so much, and I really agree. And I think a lot of that is because, I mean, you wouldn't even have to look at the concerti to know what the euphonium is capable of. You could look at almost exclusively the Stars and Stripes Forever and understand that like euphonium has the capacity to change roles every 2.5 measures.
That's right. Da dum ba-dum ba-dum. Ba-ba-da-ba-dum, bum ba-dum, bum 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 da da. Yeah. Well, you talked about a couple things I want to touch on. I mean, when you mentioned jazz and how your background to that is limited because of being a euphonium player, I'm very lucky that I started as a saxophone player
Yeah.
because otherwise, they my friend Laura Lineberger said that euphonium players can't swing from a rope. You know,
She should be
you
Rich
know,
Madison.
that's the best thing. But and it's not that the instrument can't or the player can't, but because they weren't exposed. Like for me, I was in jazz band from well, they tried to form a jazz band in middle school and it didn't happen. But my first jazz band experience was when I hit high school. I was playing trombone or I think bari sax. But when I went, through my undergraduate, I played bari sax in the jazz band. I think 3.5 years there. And then when I went to Michigan or to IU, I played in the big bands there all semesters too. So I've had the good exposure. Plus, then I taught jazz. I was the head of the jazz area at my university here for about 3 years.
That's
And I ran our
awesome.
second band and I ran the top band. So I've gotten to really look closely at scores and stuff for that where most euphonium players wouldn't.
Yeah.
The other thing is I was going to say is that you talk about those courses, and the people teaching those classes that
Mm.
are writing the books for the composition and all that composing. My teacher that taught, and I won't mention their name, had been at Michigan State University for 50 something years.
Wow.
And he was using a book that was from the 70s. And in
Mhm.
that book, it was mentioning, oh, if in case you have maybe it was the 80s, I think. You had to get it was print on demand because it's so old. If you had access to a computer, it wasn't even modern. But the handouts the man was using for that class, there wasn't a euphonium handout.
Yeah.
And so I created one in the exact same style as the one he had for trumpet. And I gave him one. He let me present the euphonium to the class. I guess it was
That's
just to
awesome.
throw me a bone. And then along comes Gretchen Renshaw, and she took that class like the next year, and she's in that same class, and she shows me this stuff. And he didn't even. I even said you can have this handout, put it in your thing. He didn't even include it in his packet, and it's
That's
like so.
crazy.
They never talked about euphonium ever in that class,
Yeah,
and
I
that was for 50 years at that school. If
that's
you took that
nuts.
class.
Yeah, and when that's so upsetting, given like, I mean, Michigan State is a very reputable band school.
Leonard Falcone was there. I
Yeah, like
know.
it's nuts.
But here's this teacher, and again, I'm not trying to say anything bad. He's a wonderful composer, different things, but it
Yeah,
wasn't a priority to talk about it. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, and as you know from my paper, it was. I don't know if we've told them what my paper was, but it's pretty much is the cello still. It's is it still the euphonium is still the cello of the wind band is the whole thing behind it. And I dug into. I first started out was just gonna be looking at band excerpts and stuff like that, and then
mhm,
it started making me mad because
yeah,
there's all these great parts. Like
mhm.
when you look at all the transcriptions from ML, Matthew Lake, or I'm trying to think of all different ones. Claude. I'm like now I'm having a brain fart. I was going to say Claude
Yeah,
Cassidy.
I mean, all the Sefronic transcriptions for the Marine Band kind of speak for themselves.
Those were great. Yeah, and help. Anything Granger, those were original works. Anything
Yeah,
Sousa. Then I'm like, well, why is our stuff so weird now? So then
yeah,
I started looking at all the harmony books and all the composition books.
yeah,
I'm talking the Piston and all. I mean, all of those.
yeah.
And then
And I
I went
mean,
further back because Michigan State had a lot of really great band stuff. I found stuff
yeah,
from like in the late 1800s. Well, the problem started there, and that's in my paper where
yeah,
there were books that talked great about the euphonium's role. And it would say that like there's nothing. They were kind of the shortstop of the band.
hmm,
They did not belong to a section because they traveled to so many. And
yeah,
then another book would say if he is a bit keen, give him something only to practice, but
yeah.
nothing too difficult because it won't be clean. I mean, it basically said don't do it, don't give anything too hard for this instrument. I mean, it was in a
That's
book, a
crazy.
published book.
Yeah,
And then there was another book that had chapters on instruments soon to be obsolete. And
yeah,
you
the
probably saw my
Forsyth.
favorite. Mandolin was in there, I think C melody, saxophone, sarrusophone. I mean,
Hmm,
Alphaclyde was in there, and then euphonium was listed there.
yeah,
Scary. That
yeah.
person thought we were gone, but those were I think that's where it started. So now, if anyone buys the Walter Piston or they buy some of those
Hmm.
different books that are out there
The
for composition, they
the
don't say anything about euphonium in it.
the standard text for most orchestration classes right now is either Norman Del Mar's Anatomy of the Orchestra or Samuel Adler's The Study of
Adler doesn't say
Orchestration.
anything either.
So I own the Adler third edition, and I went to check, and it's better than I anticipated. The Adler says that like um euphonium, I think the specific statement is like composers like Strauss and Holst found particular use for the euphonium and its ability, or like the tenor horn or tenor tuba and its ability to play quite vibrantly in the upper register where the tuba parts are more difficult. And that's where I was like, what? Because I mean, I've taken a lot of tuba lessons during my master's degree too, and like, I mean, there's problems all over. Like, they don't even understand how to write for tuba. How can we ask them to understand how to write for euphonium? Because the Adler page talks about how like um, all orchestral tubas play B flat or C tuba, which is definitely not true. I would say far more play F tuba than C tuba. It talks about how like pedal E flat is the lowest note tuba can play. And I'm like, that's, I mean, if I warm
There's
up for
always
5 minutes,
something
I have pedal
wrong.
C. I have pedal C if I've warmed up for 5 minutes. And like I've been playing tuba maybe 3 years. Like this is insane. Like and then
There's always
like
something wrong, and
all of
even
these
those.
lists about how like Wagner and Berlioz parts are like too high for the tubas and it's really difficult for them. And I was like, clearly these guys don't know very much about tuba because like
No,
all
and
all of the college tuba players I know play Wagner and Berlioz all the time.
yeah, I don't. They're not asking the right people, And the thing
Yeah,
is like I was saying earlier. I mean, there's just a lot of wrong stuff, even in the books that are like the brass methods classes.
yeah,
Those say wrong things too. And
Hmm.
that's what's teaching people that are wanting to be band directors, about our instruments. So it starts in
Yeah.
other areas, not just composition.
And
I
it's
don't know. I
funny. I think it's funny that like people are relying so much on the this knowledge and not so much on the this knowledge, because that's one of the things that I think has set my band music personally a
or
bit
going and
apart.
asking a tuba player.
Yeah.
Go and
But
ask someone in person. Don't
yeah.
look at the book,
Yeah.
not written by a tuba player,
But
right?
yeah, and well, and I was thinking about the thing you were saying earlier about how you learned so much just from listening. I think another fundamental issue of people writing band music now is like, and part of not understanding the medium is like, yeah, it's not really taught in school, but they don't know band music either.
You know what they want to do? They want to do score study. They're not using their ears.
Yeah,
And I feel like the score study is cool, but listen to recording and listen to what you're hearing and write down what you're hearing. And then
yeah.
maybe you can go look at the score. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of bass backwards, but I don't know.
I wouldn't say that. The thing I would say is like I think because like I don't like to look at scores a ton. I really like to spend time listening. And what I'll do is I'll like plan a long workout or a long run and I'll queue up a playlist of things I want to dig into. I used to like train for marathons and stuff, and so like if I was doing a 10-mile run that day, I'd have a playlist of all the music that I wanted to get through. And I'd really like, I mean, when you're pounding the pavement for 10 miles, you know you're going to be running for about an hour and a half. Like, that's a long time to really let your brain stray into the music and figure out what's going on. And the thing I came away with was stuff like, well, why would Maslanka use this kind of gesture? And why would he take so long? And isn't that a lot like some of the gestures Steve Reich would make? And where did that influence come from? Why is that so effective? And then I tried to implement something like that in my piece. Or the piece I spent the most time studying in the last year was the Guy Duker transcription of Pines of Rome, the really
Uh
old
huh.
one that's like
Yeah.
incredible. And the thing I kept coming back to is why is it so significant that he scores 9-part clarinet choir in this piece? There's a reason. And a lot of it is so to have all of the low string parts covered at the beginning of the second movement. But like the
And by
oaky,
the same kind
thick
of voice.
reed sound, yeah. But like this thick, reedy clarinet sound really gives you this idea of like, oh, like, and hearing that in a rehearsal last year was like, oh, like if there's a sound that's like a big ancient forest, it's that.
Yeah.
And like having the exposure to that kind of a sound color that I'm pretty sure no collegiate band composer would think about writing right now.
Well, I mean, if you think about what you're saying, like you've got this piece that had all these strings, but now
Yeah,
some Yahoo comes along and they're going to give some to the clarinet, some to the saxophone, some to
yeah,
bassoon. Well, all those things they're gonna sound so different. It's not
yeah,
going to have that same blend as it being all the strings. So I think
yeah.
that is brilliant. Well,
And the
Sousa's
color gets
band
really
had
special.
didn't Sousa's band carry? I mean, he had a lot of clarinets in that in the
Oh
clarinet in
yeah,
the Sousa
all
band.
kinds.
That's they brought
Yeah,
tons.
well, and that's one of the things that I think people miss. Uh, the Sousa band needed to function not only as a symphonic wind ensemble, but as a load of chamber ensembles. And this is the fundamental issue I see with so many band composers. They don't understand that the wind ensemble is like 80 chamber groups and can function like 80 chamber groups. The only composer I've really seen do this incredibly expertly in the last 10 to 15 years is David Maslanka, personally.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of when I've done marching band scores and I write like chamber groups. When you mentioned that, it made me think of that's kind of how I do for that. I don't do that cutter mold. The tenor
Yeah,
sax is the same as euphonium part.
yeah,
The alto sax is the same as the mellophone part. The clarinet's the same as the trumpet part. I mean, I
yeah,
try to get woodwind sections. I try to get colors within, and I don't have, there'll be places where the tenor sax is not playing when the
mm,
euphoniums are, and there's places where the euphoniums, I mean,
yeah.
I really believe that color thing and this concept you're mentioning now about this chamber stuff can happen anywhere, not just indoors.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how do
Um,
they score for drum corps? I mean, there's got to be some really, really good, cool math to that.
yeah,
Not
seriously.
just writing for, trumpet ensemble,
Yeah, and I haven't studied nearly as much brass band music as I probably should have, but I imagine that writing for drum
That
corps
should be
is
your
much.
next assignment.
That's yeah, that's really kind of the goal. I have a couple big
Study
projects
some
I'm doing
brass
this
band
semester.
stuff.
Yeah, I have a couple big projects this semester. I'm finishing like this big symphonic poem for wind ensemble. It's like 16 minutes, four movements, huge piece. It's really really fun.
Wow.
And it's basically a national parks tour of the United States. It's really fun. Is
Oh, I want to see that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was inspired by Pines of Rome. That's why I was studying that piece so much. And it was I wrote it as a retirement gift for the director of bands who just retired from Illinois, because I wanted him to have a piece to do with festival bands. That would be really cool and challenging,
Neat.
more here than challenging here, which is really cool. I mean, it's got some
Yeah.
challenges here, but it's more challenging here, which I think is really fun and the kind of music that he likes to teach. Um,
Have you
then
studied Julie Giroux's music?
here and there, I have
Because I
her
think
fifth or
she's
sixth
worth checking
symphony.
out.
Yeah,
She
I have the
writes
score for her
lots of.
fifth or sixth symphony, but I know a lot of her stuff.
She's someone who doesn't jip the euphonium for sure, because she'll write
Yeah,
the VCs all in her euphonium parts.
yeah, yeah. It's really fun. We're playing the Jim Stevenson Symphony in the Wind Symphony here right now, and that's really fun. Um,
Yeah,
and then I'm planning to submit for the Marine Band competition this year. I don't know if that's something you know about. The Marine Band has
that solo competition.
no, the call for scores competition. So the instrumentation is kind of specific, but the all the limitations are is the piece has to be under 13 minutes. It has to be for the instrumentation they've specified. It can't have been performed by anybody else because the prize is like it's cash and a premiere by the Marine Band, which is like, and I don't think there's an application fee.
Whoa.
It's like the fact that there wouldn't be people submitting for this like hurts my brain.
Well, you got to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they were advertising the crap out of it at Midwest, so I hope a lot of people submit. But so my plan is to I
Good
have
luck. That'd
I
be
have the
great.
seedlings for a piece stewing for that, and then this the companion for this project that you're contributing to right now is a concerto for euphonium and orchestra. So the idea is I wanted to do an inventory and basically have like a document that establishes the state of the euphonium, a bit that's like a massive and in-depth, well maybe not massive, but like a really in-depth and accessible orchestrational resource for composers made by euphonium players that says, here's what we do, here's examples of how it works that are great, and then by the end we have a work that synthesizes all of that stuff and all of the crazy extended technique from some of the experimental euphonium players that I happen to know to really make this into something that's really cool. And then a concerto that showcases all of it in an ensemble that has a huge variety of instruments, where the other part of it was like there's not really that many works for euphonium and orchestra, which is kind of nuts. I
It
I
might
took
be that it was
I
a
took I,
band and then they
yeah,
created an orchestra one, but which ones have
yeah.
really been written for euphonium and orchestra only?
There's like euphonium and orchestra only might be two or three. One
Yeah, I
like
know the Cosma is available for orchestra on rental,
yeah.
but I don't think it was written for orchestra first.
Yeah, the only one I know of that was orchestra first, and I don't think it has a band version is Linkla, as far as
Yeah,
concerti. And I think
yeah.
when I took inventory of it a couple years ago, I think I found 10 that have orchestral versions.
Check out Adam Fry's CDs that he's done with the euphonium
Yeah,
concerti with the orchestra. And I think isn't there Alan Feinstein? or Feinstein. I'm
yeah,
not sure. And I'm just trying to think. There might be stuff that he got commissioned for orchestra. I don't know.
yeah,
I can't remember that CD.
yeah. I can't remember. I found a couple concerti, like obviously the big ones, because like Horvitz, Ellerby, Kozma, um, Linkla are all available with orchestra. I found a few more, but like I could only find like one person that had ever played them. There's this kind of
Yeah,
wacky concerto Demandre premiered, but like I mean, it's so few. And so the
yeah.
idea was to have something that was like, okay, I think I have a really fundamental understanding of like how all over the place the euphonium can be and how it can be supported by all of these different sections in such a unique way. I want to make that as a piece of music. And the idea
Good.
is to
That'd be
do
great.
I've been really inspired by the music of Georgi Ligeti over the course of my career. He was a huge inspiration for the teacher of my master's degree, who's the teacher of my, or one of the teachers for my professor of composition in undergrad. So um, I'm studying his Hamburg concerto, which is his French horn concerto, and it's 7 short movements rather than 3 longer ones, or two
Oh
longer ones.
wow.
And so with one of the things I thought about is like, okay, well, seven short movements that are all based on similar thematic material could probably be written pretty fast. And each one can have its own super distinct character. So I can show off everything that the euphonium can do in a bunch of different situations.
That sounds great. It reminds me of a piece I saw at the first Women's Brass Conference years ago, and I can't remember the name of it. Something with oranges or whatever for trombone, but it introduced all the different mutes.
Yeah, that's
It
cool.
was, each movement had like one was a plunger, another one was a cup mute. But I mean, if you're thinking about doing something like that, then definitely include a movement that has the mute.
Yeah, I'm planning to do mutes. I was thinking about inventing a mute for the concerto, but I thought that might be kind of excessive. What I thought about doing instead, because this is kind of the kick I'm on, is so for the improvised music ensemble last semester, we had a class period where we had to create a preparation for our instrument. And my friend Jessica, who plays French horn in a group, brought in a load of different kinds of cooking sheet to mute her French horn with. So she had parchment paper and aluminum foil, all these tiny
Oh
little things,
wow.
real like almost harder to get than not. And that wouldn't mute the sound of the French horn, but would alter the timbre because
Change
they
it.
would buzz differently on the brass as she played, and I loved it. And that's kind of been my kick recently. It's like
That
tiny little
sounds
things
cool.
like that are like, what would happen if you stuck a water bottle in your horn? How would that mute the sound? How would it change it? And what can we explore with that? So that rather than going like, I mean, I'll probably include straight mute for a movement because like, why not? But I thought that would be a much more interesting idea in terms of figuring out like where wacky can we take this? And then is is have you heard of the euphonium player Matty Barber? I think he's based out in California. Super
I have not.
experimental heavy brass player, really cool. Um, he has an album called In the Tank. He recorded it in
I'll look
this
it up.
this recording studio in Colorado that's like an old nuclear shelter and has not quite infinite reverb. And he did a piece in there. I don't remember what it's called, but he puts a bass clarinet mouthpiece on his euphonium. And so
Hmm.
you only, because of the acoustics of it, you really only get the low fundamental,
Might have
but
seen that.
because of all the reverb, the music becomes the overtones that change over it. And I figured out how he got the bass clarinet mouthpiece onto the horn. So I want to use that effect because I think having that kind of a sound that's just like so out of this world, nobody's imagined a soloist doing something like that would be something really, really
Well,
special.
think about how who is it? Sergio has changed the shape. Is it Sergio
Yes. Yeah.
that has that saxophone looking
Oh
tuba?
no, that's Roland. Roland has the
Well, yeah,
saxophone thing.
Timpani. Yeah,
One
yeah,
of
yeah,
the yeah,
yeah.
one of those European guys.
Yeah, but but even
Yeah.
Sergio does some very unique things too. I mean, I've seen
Sergio plays that Lusophone. It's a similar orientation where it's set up like a huge contrabass saxophone where it sits on the ground. But it's
yeah,
made out of all those old King sousaphone parts.
yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Is that
Oh
horn?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, Roland
but
has
both of
one.
them, they both
Roland
do something with different
Roland's
shapes.
Roland's is wacky. His is like you hang the tuba from a neck strap and you can detach the lead pipe in such a way where the new apparatus like makes you
It looks
hold
like a
the tuba like a
guitar,
saxophone. Yeah.
or like a guitar or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was at when we were on tour with the Sousa band years ago. We went into we were in Iowa. We went to the Music Man's Museum,
That's
and then that
awesome.
music, where all that stuff was. And there was actually was a room with 76 trombones in the ceiling, but there was another room that had a museum that had instruments and stuff like that, a lot of historical stuff. And there was these brass instruments that were shaped like saxophones. I can't think, they were called Nerubophone. I can't remember the name of it, but they were trumpets that were shaped like that. And and there were different sizes of them because of the craze of the
Yeah.
saxophone when that was a real because the shape of the
Yeah.
saxophone. So they made some instruments like that, and I always thought that was interesting. So when I saw that Roland and Sergio were making the different shapes, and even I guess the first one to do that would have been Jim Self to make the
Yeah.
fluba, that
Yeah.
giant like trumpet shape.
Yeah.
But I mean, there is more appeal, I think, when people think of Kenny G with the long hair and the soprano sax. I mean, that got a lot of
Yeah.
attention. And then here we are with our tuba looking oompa thing. You know,
Yeah.
Early Oystein Bodsvik was long
Mhm.
hair.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. I wonder the different shapes, the different colors. I think now there are people that are trying more experiments, like what you're saying. But
Yeah.
the shape of our instrument sometimes is kind of a maybe an association with bass line tuba stuff. But I wonder.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One, I think this is a really interesting opportunity to bring up a thought I had that this came out of reading your paper. Do you think it's actually kind of a problem that euphonium is defining itself as an instrument by comparing itself to other instruments rather than saying like this is a euphonium and this is what it does? And I don't mean to say that like I
Yeah, yeah, no.
take beef with your paper by any stretch of the imagination. I just a thought I had was like, okay, if we're telling people that like euphonium is the cello of the wind band, haven't we already like by that point said we're not as important because we have to define our instrument by something else?
Well, I mean, I think when I was doing that paper, it was pretty much looking to see what's happening with our role in the
Hmm.
wind band rep. And people voiced for decades called us the cello of the wind band because the cello has such a
Yeah.
unique thing. But the role we are now doing, and this was my paper was 10 or 11 years ago, the role we were doing at the time of my paper was we were getting kind of like third trombone parts or
Yeah.
like a tenor tuba part that was up an octave, but there'd be pieces of music that had beautiful like moments that so could be the euphonium that it wasn't.
Yeah.
But is our real voice supposed to be the cello? Is it evolving? Is it evolving to
Yeah.
be bass trombone and support? I don't know. I like the role where we have where we're doing the more melodic and the counterline kinds of things, but I also love
Yeah.
having the anger bass lines. But I don't know. One of my favorite
Yeah.
things Benta Elvo told me was she said that do you want to hire a euphonium player or do you want to hire Benta?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier when we were talking how she's gone taking the euphonium in different ways, like her teacher,
Yeah.
Yuka. I don't know. I think our instrument is young. It is super
Yeah.
young.
That's the outlook I've tried to have recently. Like right after the Coast Guard band audition, I got into kind of and I think a lot of euphonium players do at some point. They get into this kind of funk of like, wow, I think euphonium stinks because like our music is getting boring. Like people don't write interesting stuff for us. Like I'm never gonna get a gig. All of that kind of thing. When I was talking with Hiram at Midwest this year, one of the things that we talked about was like, euphonium has only been around like 150, 170 years in the grand scheme of things. We're in on the ground floor, so let's go. If we can go really nuts with it, we'll set up future generations for a lot of really interesting stuff. And Lance and I talked about this last week. We've done a really good job, I think, of making sure that the euphonium has a very deep set of literature, but we don't have a very wide set of literature. And that's what I'm
I
really
agree.
interested in seeing. And this brings up another question I have, which do you think the current conservatory model encourages, well, students in general, but euphonium students especially, to experiment enough? Because I don't often, I find that it's more often that you see people who think like pantomime is as good as it gets than you find people who are interested in like trying to find something really new. I think we might be at the cusp of changing that. But I'm kind of upset
Hmm.
at the idea that like pantomime is the Glengarry leads of euphonium music.
Well, I mean, pantomime has a lot of really cool things. There's beautiful
Yeah.
melodies. You can remember some of the stuff in there, the 10/8 feel, and there's different things from that, the pretty opening, and then
Oh,
there's
for
the
sure.
flash. But the piece that I think preceded that one would be the Boccalari, Fantasia di Concerto, which is very pantomime-like in
Yeah.
some ways. The structure, you got the beautiful introduction, beautiful melodies, embellished obligato section. Then there's the bolero or the 10/8, and
Yeah.
and then the heroic thing at the end. So I mean, there's been sort of this template. We got away from the theme of variations, which I love theme of variations. There needs to be a modern theme of variation. Maybe what your piece you write is a theme of variation, and each
The
of the
last movement is
variations.
the last movement. Well, it loosely is a theme of variations because the form of the piece is George Campbell's hero's journey. So it's not like a standard symphonic or concerto based form, but I wanted to like have a story form rather than a music form, and then each
Yeah.
movement of it is a different style and form. Actually, you're gonna love this piece because like um one of the things I wanted to establish with it is like you need to know that the soloist can jam. So the third movement is all improvised,
Oh,
except with
perfect. But
there's a
your
couple
problem
of
is
the
people will bolt from that and they won't play it. So you better have a written out version they can play.
No, what I'm gonna say is the reason they're not playing is because they can't.
Is there a consortium going on for your piece? Do you have a consortium going with it?
No, I just wanted to write it.
Do a consortium.
I should.
I'll donate.
Cool.
I'll
We'll
buy
talk
in.
later. We'll talk later.
All right. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, but
that'll be
back to
fun.
kind of the form and the different things you're talking about, I think that there is room for change. There are still the people that are going to be kind of stuck in the mud with the old stuff, but it's time for people to move on. I mean, I when I was running the jazz band here, I made my euphonium students play trombone in there, a lot
Hmm.
of them, because I wanted them to get into that. And then, if there would have been any time, I think I soloed with the band a few times with euphonium like that, but
Yeah,
there needs to be more opportunities for our instruments because we don't get them in the orchestra very readily, and we don't get them in the jazz band. It's not always in the Latin bands, but there's nothing
yeah,
wrong with us being in those groups. Someone
yeah,
just needs to push for it to make it happen. You just got to
yeah.
be there. And our writers, I don't know that the writers are going to start writing. I mean, one of my students did a paper, a research about, the role of the euphonium. We actually we called Mike Roylance and, actually we texted Mike Roylance and emailed them and Gene Percorny, Chris Olka. I'm trying to think who else. We asked some of the heavies about what they thought about euphonium in the orchestra. Did they think that there were going to be composers who would start writing? Could they add the euphonium
Hmm.
to it?
Yeah,
And I don't see that happening. And I don't know. I hate that to say that, but
yeah,
they didn't think so either. We
yeah.
asked them what did the other orchestra musicians think about the euphonium when it joined the orchestra.
Hmm.
We're trying to find out like what the scoop was. Like, why did they
Yeah,
hire the trombonist to play the orchestra parts for euphonium rather
yeah,
than getting a euphonium player? And we find out it's because they get doubling. They get twice as much money if they put the trombone down for that one
yeah.
piece. We
When,
also found out that there's probably not going to be euphonium added to it because it costs money to add that. That's another part. And
yeah,
what I mean, the orchestras don't play new composed music like the wind band does.
yeah.
They
It's been,
don't.
uh, is Steve Peterson somebody you've run across at all in your career? He's the former director of bands at Illinois and at Ithaca. He was at
I
Northwestern
don't
for a
think
while
so.
too.
No,
Steve's
I don't
really
think
cool.
so.
He's the guy that I wrote this like big symphonic poem about the national parks for. And one of the things he said at a talk I was at with him earlier this year was, uh, especially as long as wind ensemble and music education are so tied together, band is the future. It's the future for composers, it's the future for instrumentalists, and
Yep.
it's to our advantage to lean into that.
Well, that's what was when I was in this class for my doctorate. It was like about kind of like looking back in the old orchestration treatises and the old
Hmm.
practices. How the concert halls back in the day weren't as big as they now are now, and the pianos
Yeah.
were different. Well, what we learned in that class was that composers all dream to write for the symphony orchestra, and
Hmm.
and you want to write, but no one will play it.
Hmm.
People are still wanting to hear Brahms or wanting to still hear Mahler. They
Yeah.
still want to hear the big hits, but the question was, how long is that going to be still happening as our audiences thin out? Like jazz music, like big band jazz is
Hmm.
going away,
Yeah.
sadly, because those people are dying. But we discovered in that class that if you wanted your piece played, the band probably would do it. But the
Yeah.
orchestra, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. My school
Yeah.
here, my university, they're playing Pines of Rome and all that. That's coming up, but like, are they playing, programming something brand new?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I should write a piece for orchestra and just see if they would do it and
Yeah.
report back to you. I mean, because,
Yeah. I'd be really interested.
but
And
I mean, the thing is, so it's hard. It's hard for them to break that mold. They talked
mhm.
about in that class about we talked how they're playing the museum pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
And
museum pieces are other people of all the dead composers, so to speak.
mhm. Yeah. And
And then
one,
the band, I'm like, I want the band to play the older pieces too.
mhm.
Like, I don't think my students at my university are going to get to ever play a Sousa March at a concert or a Carl
Yeah.
King March because they're
Yeah.
playing all the new stuff. So to me, it's like in our school here, and I don't want to get in trouble with my director of bands, the top band really seeks the new stuff. And
Yeah.
your second band plays all of the great euphonium parts.
Yeah. And well, in one of the things, so the new director of bands here at Illinois is Dr. Kevin Giraldi. He used to be at University of North Carolina, Greensboro for a long time. And
Hmm.
one of the things I think he does really well is striking a balance between like the classic rep that the top end is playing and the new rep that the top end is playing. Like this year was, or last 2022 I think, was the centennial of the premiere of Chester for band. So the top end played Chester at our concert.
Cool.
And I think, and like having like this like nice historic moment, it's a classic piece of band repertoire. It tied into some other elements of the concert, but one of the things that he mentioned was like, like we want to have like people think about like when they think about the recording of Chester, they want us I want people to think of University of Illinois recording of Chester as like this is the recording, or like this is that we said something with this piece. And not only can we
Yeah.
do all of the wacky contemporary stuff, like we play the crap out of band standards too. I thought that
Well, I
was
don't want to
really,
get in
really
trouble
important.
with my band staff, but I wish
Yeah.
that the second band would play maybe something brand new. Maybe they
Yeah.
have. Maybe I'm not paying attention, but I feel like it's what we want as composers is we want our music played. So I'm
Yeah.
so torn because the composer side of me is like, yes, the band's playing all this new music, but then the euphonium side of me is like, oh no, the role of the euphonium is wrong. There's no good parts to practice. And
Hmm.
that's what happens in our top band is that the parts aren't nearly as hip at all as the second
Yeah.
band's parts, but they are playing the new music, which I think is wonderful. I think that's great, but I
Yeah.
just wish there was a little bit of a mix.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I think about, and I was thinking about this while I was reading your paper too, is like, um, it's a little helpful for me to not have as complex music in Wind Symphony all the time, just because it gives me a little more time to really stretch myself in my solo repertoire. Like, I haven't played an original euphonium piece that I didn't write in a long time. I'm doing all transcriptions right now, like of wacky Dutch saxophone music and like R&B charts, and like really kind of experimental and really trying to stretch my artistry as a musician. That's not to say that I don't want like more interesting parts sometimes in the wind ensemble literature, but as a composer, I think that like being able to write interdimensionally for all of the instruments is like really to the advantage. I don't think um I don't think it's I don't know if like we're going to get like Sousa euphonium parts all of the time anymore. That's not to say that we shouldn't have some of them. Like we should get
We're
it at
not
least
going to
some.
see that. We're not going to see that
Yeah,
again, I don't think.
I don't think
It's
so
not in the
either.
well, it's not in the orchestration book, so they don't know to
Yeah,
do it. And
yeah,
I think the further and further we get away from, you know, Rangers writing and like earlier I was talking, it's Mayhew Lake, not Matthew.
yeah,
It's Mayhew Lake, and then Claude Smith. Those people's
yeah,
writing, which really had like all those great parts. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to come back to that or not. But everything, I don't know. Bell bottom pants has come back, right?
yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, totally. And like that, and that's the thing I was thinking about, like in trying to come up with a good way of outlining what the euphonium is good at in a document for composers. I think being able to line item roles it can have right away is really helpful. And if we're going to
Well, there
like,
should be, the role should be discussed, our
yeah,
range, the ability
oh,
to blend.
absolutely. But like,
There should be the extended techniques that we can do. What was the
yeah,
piece that Misa Mead just played with the Army Band, which was really cool?
I
Popping
haven't
the
seen it.
mouthpiece and smacking the horn.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen it
find
yet.
that. Find that.
I
It's
will.
very, very good.
Yeah, I
And she
do. I'd
did
like to do a lot of
it
stuff
with
like
a
that with the improvised
euphonium doing
ensemble.
percussive things on her instrument while the orchestra was playing.
Yeah, and
It
the
was
th
fantastic.
the thing I was thinking about already that you brought up earlier is formatting everything like the orchestration textbook, so it's something they're used to seeing. And so the idea is like they get it and they're like, "Did this chapter fall out of my book? How have I not seen this?"
Well, I mean, this is the thing I'm kicking myself as we're talking. I'm like, why don't we have on? I mean, I used to have a website. I couldn't keep up with it, and it was just nothing new, nothing new, nothing new. So I let it go.
Yeah,
But having a website when someone did a Google search on scoring for the phone, it would pull out a great handout that we had.
yeah,
Like how the teacher doesn't always
yeah,
use a book; they have the course packet. We need a
yeah,
course packet that's available all over everywhere for someone to find,
yeah.
so we can get them to write for us again.
That was really the idea for this project. Is like the course packet's going to be everywhere, and then I'm going to film the lecture recital that goes with it at the end of the semester, so that like
Good.
And then it's linked so that they can go to YouTube and there's a 45 minutes to an hour and a half lecture that explains everything in the packet with live excerpts played from it. So they
Good.
can see like a practical multimedia application of it. And then, and this goes back to something else I was thinking about. It's like, I think as far as like comparing the instrument to another instrument in the wind ensemble, so it's a little more in the medium, I think euphonium has a lot more in common with saxophone than it does with tuba, which is really kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I think a lot,
Yeah.
the thing, Ryan Robinson brought this up when I was having a chat with him one time, is that if you look at the patents for the old European baritones, especially the rotary baritones, and the old baritone sax horns, the modern compensating euphonium is very close to the sax horn, much
Yeah.
more so than the old rotary baritones. So the fact that like it's brass and saxophone ish makes a little more sense for this like kind of can play these super vibrant solos that cut through the whole band when they're not doubled in anything else, but kind of blend with everything else too, that the saxophone is also really, really good at. The interesting thing about euphonium, especially if you have a player who's a savage, is you kind of get tenor, bari, and bass sax in one instrument,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
Well, my favorite big band, my favorite jazz chart of all time was Superbone Meets the Bad Man. And, Maynard's playing the Superbone, and it's the Barry sax,
Yeah,
and it's that piece. And I agree. The Barry sax, the saxophone. I mean, the saxophone is really sort of like you said. It's very conical and it's very similar
yeah,
in the shape of it. It's just got holes and
yeah,
it's got a reed. Where our instrument, has the cup mouthpiece and the
yeah,
valve. So I mean, they're very similar, just different shapes.
yeah.
But I
And
like that saxophone shaped horn.
yeah, I kind of do
Yeah.
too. But I think the part of the reason saxophone hasn't suffered in the same way as euphonium is that writing for saxophone and writing for clarinet is so similar. The saxophone is just louder and has
Yeah,
a bit of a
yeah. I
different
mean,
timbre. Like if you can write
well,
for clarinet, you can reasonably write for saxophone.
there's the iconic shape too, though. I mean, you could
Yeah,
think about Kenny G was a saxophone player. I mean, Boots what's that guy Boots, whatever, that was the famous country yakety sax guy. I mean, the saxophone has been more of a visual thing. Like when do you find there are commercials now that has euphonium on it, though, I will say, and it's
that's
always really
awesome.
bad. They walk past the euphonium's walking past the cellist
Yeah,
that's doing the busking, and they're broken euphonium players going to the real gig, and then it's that little horn and it's like a rock band. I mean, it's
yeah,
bad, but I mean, you are seeing our instrument more in car commercials because it's big,
yeah,
but it hasn't been really visible.
yeah, that's true.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's,
and I've always wondered, like, our method books are really weird too. I
yeah,
mean, if you think about, I've studied bass for a while some years ago, and the bass books was so different, so more engaging with color, with pictures, with people that look cool. If
yeah.
you look at in the very beginning euphonium book, there's someone that's sitting there and they look like they getting ready to, I don't know, go to the bathroom or
Yeah,
something.
that like stone etching of Simone
Yeah,
Mantia.
yeah, well, I'm just saying that there's nothing. Well, there's no history. There's no pictures of like famous like Rufus Reed or whatever. I mean, I'm just saying there's those. They
Yeah,
have a lot of history just in the very beginning of their book, and
yeah,
it's cool looking. And that they're not learning the B flat scale. They're learning like
yeah.
some kind of a lick that's made
So
out of the B flat scale.
so
But
what
look
I'm hearing is
different.
like we need to give people Rich Madison on day one.
Well, I mean, I've always wanted to write a beginning method book because I taught a lot of beginners for many
Yeah,
years in Orlando, and in our books, they're really kind of no one wants to look in it. I mean,
yeah. Well,
I feel like if it was in color and there was like pictures and you saw a picture of
yeah,
an African American player in there, you saw an Asian person, you saw tall people, little
yeah,
people, and you could find someone in that
yeah,
picture from the very beginning that could be me versus it just being this one thing. And
yeah,
then the instrument that shows the parts is stupid looking. They should have like
yeah,
an eagle on it or have flames on the bell. And I mean, I'm just,
yeah. I think you.
something so it looked cool. It was red,
Yeah,
not just a stencil drawing.
the brass gym comes to mind. I love all of the photos in that, but like they were so
Yes.
unapologetically like goofy, but like cool. And the thing I love so much about the brass gym, and I think part of it is because it's kind of written for older musicians, but like uh, an issue I have with method books and honestly young band music across the board is it kind of talks down to the intelligence of kids. Because,
Well, this is the
um,
thing. What happens with the method books? Everyone's equal.
yeah,
Everyone's playing the same stuff, and then that first song, Regal March,
hmm,
or whatever the first, like the sheet
yeah,
music, and then we don't have anything. I did a clinic at Midwest some years ago, and I talked about the role of euphonium and how to make euphonium players, how to get euphonium players to want to be in your band and how for them to love it. And I
hmm,
just basically I put up a piece of music on the screen. It was called "Sliding the Scale," and it was supposed to be about the B flat scale and the scale in the song, but the tuba and euphoniums never once got to play the scale. All he goes
yeah,
bum bum bum
yeah,
bum bum bum, and the band was going ba da 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 da, and they're going ba ya ya. But all the euphoniums did the whole song was just the roots and the fifths or the fourths.
yeah,
Never got to play the scale. Now, why are we so dumb that we can't play the scale ever?
yeah, absolutely. I think that's really
And then so
frustrating.
who
I mean,
wants to practice that music?
I would take
No
it even a
one.
step I would take it even a step farther. I think that like the idea that a method book wants to look at a student and says you're only good enough to play the first fifth of the B flat scale on your first day of playing the instrument, when in reality, like the idea that we don't teach at least a chromatic fifth first is atrocious. Because like,
Well, why are we starting out with B flat? We should start out with a key of C, but in a full
yeah,
band method, you can't because of
yeah.
the different instruments. So I see that.
Yeah.
Well, I
But I
think
mean,
that
like even
chromatic.
being able to use all of the buttons right away, I think tells a student like, oh, well, this isn't like using weird fingerings. Like nothing's weird anymore. We learned all of the fingerings on the first day. Like, yeah, you have to learn 7 notes, but it's 7 notes. Like that's not that many. And then I don't think it's very difficult then to say like, okay, well, because we've taught them the chromatic scale, let's ditch the key signatures for a little bit. And that's not to say like key signatures are bad. It's not that we're eliminating them from the curriculum. I think they just need to be in a different position, because one of the things I found is if I give a piece without a key signature and write in all the accidentals, I can get eighth graders to play in B major no problem.
No problem.
And
But
so I found that like I think they need a little more time seeing the patterns before they know to look at a key. Like I think a key signature is a memory problem more than it is a literacy problem. And
well,
once
I
you've
I
logged enough hours seeing those patterns, you toss it into the curriculum and they're like, "Oh, I know these patterns. I see them all the time."
I feel a little bit the opposite of you, but I'm
Interesting.
always open. See,
Yeah.
I haven't taught again like started beginner from scratch.
Yeah.
In those books, it starts out where there's no key signature,
Hmm.
and then they give you the B flat from the very first note, right? And you have your E
Hmm.
flat, and it's always written in. And then at
Yeah.
some point they throw the key signature in there, but there's not any warnings, and so people don't want. So they learn that all those notes are always the B that no longer has a flat in it is always
Yeah.
open. So
Yeah.
then when you have a key that has a B natural in it, they can't fathom because
Yeah.
they've never seen a B natural. So I feel
Yeah.
like if there was a key signature from the start,
Hmm.
or if they taught everything in
Yeah.
C and then introduce it. But
Yeah.
I don't
Well, and
know. I've had
that's
kids,
kind of
they
my
won't
thought.
play E naturals. They won't play A
Yeah.
naturals because those always had the flat before, and then now it's gone, but
Yeah.
it's still that. When
Yeah.
they introduce a key signature, I think it should be a trap. Then that
Yeah.
would make them almost like here's one, then here's a key that doesn't have it. So
Yeah.
remember, you have to check because they don't have
Yeah.
to check it. It's still
I
always
mean,
open.
I think even like being able to introduce key signatures as a concept where like you have a really wild key signature. I don't remember which piece it is. There's a piece of roll-ons that's in G harmonic minor. And he just wrote the F sharp in the key signature. So the key signature is B flat, E flat, F sharp. And I know a lot of people who would look at that and be like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do? This is so crazy. But like, if you know your harmonic minor scale, you look at it and you go, oh, the key's G harmonic minor. That's pretty cool. And then you read the
It's
chart.
cool. Yeah, that is cool.
So I think I think you could teach key as an education concept that way. And the idea is like if the foundation is the chromatic scale, you're looking for accidentals all of the time. And once you've established that some of these patterns happen a lot, then that's the way you teach key signatures. It's like, well, look at this B flat scale. You've seen this pattern a lot. Well, the tradition is when this pattern is going to happen a lot, we write it at the beginning so we could save ink.
How about this? We don't introduce key like you're saying,
Hmm.
and we introduce B natural into there, where we show them the
Yeah.
natural for the B's, and we
Yeah.
show the E naturals, and then we introduce keys, and some are going to be flats and some are not. And because it's the
Yeah.
darndest
That's
thing to
that's
get
and
those
that's
young kids to play anything second position or second
yeah.
valve,
Yeah.
and not everything is not first. You know?
Yeah, actually, and that's exactly my thought. Like, I would go so far as to say, like, I almost think key signatures should be introduced in like eighth grade rather than sixth or seventh grade. And you go from like an atonal, everything has accidentals, like fully chromatic scale from day one. And maybe
And
we
then it
reduce
makes
it to
them
like,
check.
yeah. And then you
I
really
can
have
see
this
that.
idea, and the idea is like, it's actually really empowering. And the thesis is that like, it's not a technical issue, it's a memory issue.
I can see that.
Because like, I mean, when you think about like things that people miss most when they're sight reading, key signatures and repeat signs primarily.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so like, I don't think it's fair to kids to argue that it's a literacy problem. I think it's way
Yeah.
more fair to all musicians to say it's a memory problem.
Well, I compose all the sight readings when we do band auditions and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and I have for years. And I know that if I was writing a sight reading for right now today, I would just ba 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 beep ba 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 whatever to be in my head
Yeah.
and whatever key it was, and then I would just it's like normally three short like 4 bar things, and then
Yeah.
it goes to a lyrical one, and there's three key changes. The stuff they miss the most are ties, like
Hmm.
a half note tied to a quarter note. They don't count that very well. Rests,
Hmm.
tempo changes. Like they don't when they see it's visual. Like if they see if it's supposed to be adagio, but it's in 12/8, they see all the triplet looking things and they want to go fast
Yeah.
instead of da 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 dee da da dee dee da. They think da 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 da. So
Yeah.
like they're not noticing. Cause I think if it makes sense, like if you see music really spread out, then it looks like it's slow. But
Yeah.
if it's tight and it's got, you know what I mean? So I feel like
Yeah.
I've tried it. Like for a long time, the sight reading was the regular portrait way.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would have just one line would have, like one line would be each one of those. Well, then I switched it now to the landscape,
Yeah.
and it seems to be a little more successful for the slow one because it's spread out more.
Yeah.
I've tried things with my sight rating just to see what the
Yeah. That's really
pattern
cool.
was.
I think
And then
that's
I
really
actually
cool.
took one of the bars that was busy and I moved one of the measures down so it was three up, you know what I mean? So it was more spread out
I
to
think
see
that's
if
really
that
cool.
made it better. Kind of.
That's really cool. And well, and this actually gets to something I think a lot about. And I think this is one of the things about like a more orchestral pedagogy that I think has really helped me and that I wish more band composers got is that um, my teacher, Steve Taylor, always talks about how, like, because reading sessions are so cutthroat in the orchestral realm, everything needs to be perfect right away. And you need to, the thing that composers should lose sleep over is how easily processable and readable is your music. And
I agree.
I don't run into
I
enough
totally
people who
agree.
think about that. And as easy as like one of the things that I'll do is when I'm engraving parts, I'll zoom out really far on the score and I'll like relax my eyes a ton so everything gets blurry. And then I focus on like the distribution of the systems down the page. And if it's not visually appealing or feel really easy to look at in that way, I change it. And it's,
Yeah.
I mean, tiny things like that, like getting rid of bad
Layout
page
is the
turns, like
success of
being
your
really
piece.
obvious. And like, um, I wrote this crazy piece for chamber orchestra last semester where like the climax of it's like these two thin, like dreamy textures. And then in the middle is like this Leonard Bernstein kind of dance that folds over itself until it breaks. And the point where it breaks, there's so many ideas going on at one time that it's supposed to like kind of be sensory overload. And the arrival of that section is a 24 against 11 against 7 against 4. And it's voiced brass as one of the patterns, piano as one of the patterns, string as one of the patterns, but then split so that like the low strings, because they're so much lower than the brass, and the violins are and the violas are so much higher than the brass that you can really hear the difference in the texture, and then percussion as the other pattern. So because of the unique
Mhm.
timbre, the patterns come through orchestrationally, and it's actually like kind of effective. But the thing that my teacher and I talked about so much is, okay, so you have all these ideas happening. How can you make it so easily legible that there's no question about whether this moment will be successful. And because originally, like, in order to have the pattern happen, I needed to have some kind of wacky metric modulation. What we wound up doing instead was keeping the tempo the same and going to like 3/2 instead of keeping a 6/8 feel, and then having the feel of the piece, like the role of the pulse, just change instrument groups. And so all I had to
Cool.
put in was um, like a little note in each of the parts that said, like, listen to the cellos and basses for the pulse, because that's how it will change, and then read everything else as normal. And that, it was really interesting being able to like mesh this together in such a way, and it created like a really intense effect in the piece.
That sounds great. Well, when I teach composition to some of my students here and there, I think the layout is more important than the notes because, especially if
Yes.
you're a young composer, if it doesn't look interesting, like sometimes people just put term like legato
Hmm.
and you just see a bunch of notes. But if we see
Hmm.
slurs and you see like our
Yeah.
articulations, it seems more thought was put into it than
Yeah.
just a term. And then the page, the systems, like you're saying, how many of those are on there? How crammed is it?
Hmm.
Is it spelled wrong? Is it like B flat, D flat, E flat, and then all of a sudden is there like a G sharp or something? Like
Yeah.
to me, I've taken people's music, and I won't mention the composers, and
Hmm.
put the whole dang thing in finale and made another one so it's spelled right because
Yeah.
I find myself tripping up on stuff because it's got maybe like a B flat to C sharp
Yeah.
to E flat to E to G, and it's like just make it so it looks like it's a third. B flat to D flat
Yeah.
looks so much
We,
better than B flat to C sharp.
yeah, we read a chart with
And I
the,
read through that like no problem, but
mhm.
if it's got all the weird spellings in it, Franz Tuboka, I mean, rest in peace, but his music was so hard
Yeah.
because it was just spelled very weird, like this
Yeah.
intervals. It was a second, but it looked like a third. You know what I mean? Or it was a,
Yeah.
you know.
And
So
and
I don't
it,
know. I just feel like I had to go back through and put it all in there. And then sometimes it's
yeah.
because the page break is so bad, or it's
Yeah.
so many pages. I can condense it and make it so I don't have to manage. It's not easy to turn
Yeah.
pages if you're playing.
Yeah, if I commission a piece by a composer and it's got double sharps in it, I send it back immediately and I say, like, I don't have time to think about this. Like, it has to be changed. Like, that's
Well,
that's
yeah,
that's
and then
excess. Like, because having asking the human brain to make two calculations for one note is like actually a waste of
I
time.
agree.
It's
I
it's
agree. Yeah,
actually a
you're
waste of
right.
time.
Well,
And
then if people read it
especially
and
when
it's
especially
awkward,
when you could just write it differently, or like don't put a key signature on the page. It will sound,
well,
it
what's the
actually, it will
rule?
probably sound better.
Well, what's
And
the rule? I mean, I just feel like I break the rule I know for in a key of flats, and if I
mhm,
put a sharp in there, but I mean, we're playing B flat and we're going to D, and then if I put F sharp, that makes more sense
yeah,
because that, if I'm going, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. But I go through each part before when I'm writing something, and I kind
yeah,
of finger through it. And if it makes me look back at the key signature, I put the courtesy accidental in there.
yeah,
If it makes me wonder what it is, I'll respell it. Hit number nine, shift nine.
yeah,
Shit. But
totally.
I think that the layout is important. I think that, is it something that that the players are going to want to play? Is it's extremely difficult?
Yes.
I worked on a piece last year by a composer that about pushed me over the edge. And Gail's never wanting to jump out the window, but it was so hard.
Yeah,
I put so many hours into that, and it was so hard that it was like guaranteed there was no way I was ever going to play it perfect because it was that
yeah,
hard. And I put more hours and hours and hours into that. And when I performed it, it was just like rolling dice. Is
yeah,
it going to go great? Is it not? Even though I knew it. I mean, I put that in finale. I made a better part layout of it, and I made a play along track with cowbells because the meter changed so much.
yeah,
I mean, I was trying everything I could to try to learn this piece, and it was so much effort that went into it. By the time I got on the stage and I didn't play so well, I couldn't be mad because I had put so many hours in it. It
yeah,
made me wonder, did I put too much time into it?
yeah. Absolutely. Well, and if you're willing to spend that much time on the piece, like, you'd want the piece to be really, really good. And
I
that's the
wanted it to
and
be
that's
great.
yeah, and that's the frustrating part is like, I spent 7 weeks this semester, or this last semester, working on do you know the piece Grab It? It's for tenor saxophone and electronics. It's by this Dutch well, he's not a saxophone composer. He writes a lot of saxophone music though. His name is Jacob Terveldhuis. You gotta look this guy up. It's so cool. This piece was written in like 1999, and it's like one of the
Called
most
Grab It.
grab it. Yeah, the recording to listen to, it's pretty easy to find on like YouTube or Spotify. Arno Bornkamp is the soloist. That's the guy who's written for it. He's like one of the best saxophonists in the world. And this piece like has won like tons of awards. It's considered like one of the seminal pieces of the tenor sax repertoire, and it was written in 1999. Like it's not even that old.
Oh, cool.
And it's like it's in the really early days of like cool new pieces with electronics. I know of two euphonium players who have ever played it. I saw Irving Ray play it at the ITEC in 2019, and then I played it on my recital earlier this year. It's nuts.
Irving Ray was the euphonium player that was in the group with my student from here.
Oh, nice.
We were
Yeah,
talking earlier. Yeah, he was in the Marine Band
that's
group. He was there
awesome.
too.
That's nuts. Yeah,
I love Irving.
Irving's a really good player. I love all of the electroacoustic stuff he's doing. It's
Yes.
really given me a new idea of like how far we can take the euphonium and electronics medium, which was really fun. Uh, so yeah, I mean, but Grab It was one of those pieces where I was working on it like an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, doing super slow study, trying to play with a recording of Arno Bornkamp playing it, trying to play with something like a metronome, especially with all of these wacky meter changes, and then like having a piece where you have to set up 4 music stands because it's 12 pages and there's no rest
I've
to be
done
able
that.
to do
That's
a
not
page
fun.
turn. It's not fun. It's a heck of a show for the audience though. Like
You walk across the
yeah, like
stage.
you
Yeah.
like wiggle your way across the stage a little bit, and because the piece is really hip hoppy, it's gritty and it's got drive, and um Tervelduis really likes to use speech patterns in his music, and all of the samples for Grab It are sampled from the documentary Scared Straight, and it's about how
Hmm.
like all of these high security prisoners like threw away their lives like with whatever got them there, and how like you can't just let your life slide by you, you have to grab it by the scruff of the neck. And it's this really really intense piece of music. It's like 9
Oh,
minutes,
wow.
but it's like that was one of the pieces where um like put it on the recital, and afterwards everybody was like, whoa man, that was nuts. And it felt so good, especially because it's like I mean the piece is so out there, even though it's pretty listenable. Like I would go like a
I'm
lot of
gonna
stuff
check
in it
that
is
out.
really consonant, and like I mean there's moments for extended technique. It's just nuts. It's so cool. And
I'll have to check
he's
that
done
out.
arrangements for a lot of instrumentations. There's
Our
a two
saxophone professor plays a lot of cool music. I'll have to ask him about it if he's played that.
Yeah, it's pretty wacky. He's done a lot of really cool stuff. He has a Billy Joel, no, Billie Holiday song. A song that like samples all of this Billie Holiday stuff, and it's really cool.
Neat.
He has another one that's for piano and electronics, called Body of Your Dreams, that samples like 80s workout videos. Like it's really wacky stuff like that, but all of the music is really cool.
I'm gonna look him up.
Um, what do you like to play when you don't have something to practice for?
I like to play by ear, and every day when I get to school and I take my horn out, the first thing comes out of my instrument is whatever I'm thinking that I don't even know I'm thinking, and then I'll
Mhm.
play whatever that is, and it's normally a couple bars or whatever, and then I play it a half step lower, and I challenge my ear, and if I got out a book that had Remington warm ups and stuff like that in there, Gail doesn't want to do that, and I won't do it because it's too pattern and too boring to me. But I can make up a Remington like thing that I create on the spot, and then
Yeah.
I put it in all their keys, and then I'm fine with that. If you
Mhm.
said you had to go sit down and warm up with Remington warm ups, I would not want to do it. But you can go in there and you can play whatever you want, and you can make up a Remington style thing. I would. If I'm not working on that, then normally it's once I've warmed up, it's I love playing all the Aebersold things, all the standards. I like it. I put on the play along tracks. I do some of that for fun. Pick a jazz piece I don't know, and just try
Yeah.
to improvise over changes I have never heard before. So it kind of makes I like working, I guess, on my ear as much as I do on the face and the fingers.
Yeah.
And then normally it's I don't know, it seems like I always have something I have to be working on. I don't
Yeah.
hardly have any times in my life where I don't have something I've got coming up, if that makes sense. As soon
Yeah.
as I get done with my faculty recital next week, then I've got to start working on some stuff I'm recording with Deanna Svoboda, in a couple weeks from that.
Yeah.
And then from there, then I've got some, it's like it's sort of like there's a checklist of things that are coming up.
Oh,
If
for
I had
sure.
nothing going on, I don't know what I would do. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I probably would compose stuff, maybe start
Yeah.
writing things. I don't know.
Well, and I imagine like the jazz jam and like playing jazz standards a lot as probably like one of the more underrated ways to practice because you have to stretch like your listening and your musicality so much. And then like I mean yeah, you like especially if you're sight reading jazz standards, like you read the page for a second, but then like the point is that you get off of it. And I think this
Well, you put
brings
that play along track on and you sight read right with it,
that yeah,
and
that's
they're
what I'm
going to leave
saying.
you.
Because
They're
you
not
have
going to
to
stop and go back.
yeah, and you have to listen and like fit inside the sound of the ensemble. I think that's a really underrated way to practice, and quite frankly, something a lot of euphonium players go forward to do. Because I think what a lot of people get stuck in is this idea of like, well, we were talking about this earlier, the perfectionism and like the tendency to over practice because we're so stuck in this like what's on the page has to be perfect.
Yes.
And like if the fundamentals are perfect and you listen well, people won't know that you've made mistakes. Or if they do, and Lance and I talked about this last week, the idea of like if if your mistakes are so beautiful and so musical, like who will care? I mean, I
Yes.
think about like there's I don't remember which recording of Demondre it is. There's a recording of Demondre playing some crazy piece like he always does, and he like only if you listen to it a trillion times and look at the score can you tell that he biffs one of the notes. But it's so good that I'm like, I don't even care,
Who
man.
cares?
I wish I could biff notes like that. Are you kidding?
Well, I went to a wedding years ago of some friends from Disney, and it was like a disaster wedding you could ever imagine. It was downpour raining, up pulls up the limousine with the bride to get out, and like instead of pulling right next to the curb, it's like a big old gap. She had pretty much had to step in a puddle. But while we were waiting on the bride who was late, there was a pianist that was playing pieces while we sat there, and might have been like stuff from Beauty and the Beast or stuff, famous popular things. But this guy would play a wrong note, but then he'd do that wrong note again, so you thought he did it on purpose.
Yeah,
It might be da da dee da 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 ya da da dee ya da, and he would do that note
yeah,
again.
yeah,
And so I've learned that even when I told you earlier, I play out at the bar across the river here, the
yeah,
Toadstock Bucks. I would throw down bass lines there, and if I played a wrong note on the bass line, I'd play it again. So if
yeah,
anyone was listening, they'd think, "Oh, she did that on purpose." But
yeah.
it's
That can
true.
be
You
really
can make a wrong
powerful.
note. Yeah, I mean, you gotta. If you make a mistake, I mean, it's only human. I
Yeah,
mean, we know of a lot of recordings out there by our favorites that have wrong notes,
yeah,
wrong things in it. And you know what? It's okay. It's
yeah,
all right.
yeah. I think that too many people get focused on like the perfection of music, and I think that actually dehumanizes it a lot. And this is part of the issue I have with, I mean, being in the composition field a little bit. Um, I know so many people who are so concerned about their music being perfect. It's like the experiment of live music is that it's not going to be, but how special can the performance be in its imperfection? I think that's extraordinarily underrated.
Yes. Well, anytime you're studying a piece of music, if you find the regular CD of it, fine. That they probably went back. I know there was something we recorded and I couldn't make the phrase, so the guy goes, "Oh, just play it here, and then
Yeah,
now start here," and then they've patched it, so it's a beautiful
yeah,
phrase now. Best way to study is the live performance.
yeah,
Where are they breathing at the live performance versus
yeah.
what did they edit in on the CD?
Do you
I mean,
think?
there's that classic, the rumor about Wynton Marsalis's, perpetual, the
Yeah.
one long phrase that he's supposed to do. Apparently, that didn't happen that way in the recording session. But I'm not trying to. He's a
Oh
fantastic
yeah.
musician, but
I got
I
to see
mean,
Winton 2 weeks ago. The Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra was here. They're on tour right now with oh shoot, I'm gonna forget his name. Like he's like the best oud player ever. And
mm,
so Nasir Shamat is his name.
mm.
Um and like the way they're doing this show is the concert series is called Middle Eastern Meditations, and it's all of these Middle Eastern folk tunes in like the Middle Eastern improvised style arranged for big band. And it's the Lincoln or the Kennedy Center or Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and Nasir is playing oud instead of them having their rhythm guitarist, and it is an
Cool.
incredible show.
Wow, I'd love to see that.
It's
Well, I
really
should send you
special.
my other paper. My other paper I did was on Juan Tizol in the Duke Ellington Orchestra, because I studied, I took a jazz history class, and it talks about sort of like the influences of the Cuban, Puerto Rican
Yeah.
influence and stuff like that, and Juan Tizol and all that. But a lot of our jazz band rep has really gone different routes too. I mean, like
Yeah.
when I was running the jazz band here, we did a dance, so we played a lot of standards for part of the year, and then we did some of the good the Goodwin, Gordon Goodwin pieces. We did a lot of
Yeah.
those more newer composed pieces, but that's sort of got a cookie cutter mold too with instrumentation. So it's
Yeah.
cool when they're not using the rhythm guitar and they use a sitar or they use something
Yeah.
different. I like having the upright bass. I like having an electric bass.
Yeah.
I like having a stick bass.
When
It should be
what
different,
a what a
different.
great opportunity to talk about like how important it is for our art to be multicultural, especially as we're becoming
Yes.
more of a global community now. I was having a conversation with one of my professors about this earlier this semester. I was saying like, it's really kind of interesting, but like we've gotten so connected to the rest of the world with the internet that like my generation of musicians, I think will bring an idea of international art that we have no comprehension for right now because we're a generation that thinks of ourselves as global citizens first, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, the problem I find with the internet now with our students that are using the internet to learn and study
Hmm.
is that if there's someone like, and if you think just in the tuba euphonium world,
Yeah.
think about Connie Weldon. There's no videos of her playing. There's no
Yeah.
videos of, not a whole lot of live videos of someone like Earl Lauder, Harold Brash, Art Lehman, all them. You can't find any videos of these people, so they don't know about them. They know
Yeah.
all the current stuff. Our students are more in the current, what's going on now, but not
Yeah.
our past. Because if you only use the internet for that, then it's stopped. It only starts at a certain year.
Hmm.
And then you got guys like Dave Weirden, of course, who has found reels or has recordings, and so he's been uploading some stuff that
Yeah.
helps us in the To Be Funny world. But my studio class now this semester, we've done this project I've always wanted to do. I did it once, and then people poo-pooed it, and I brought it back as where I assign every kid a different tuba player or a different euphonium player, and they have 7 or 8 minutes to present that person to the class, and they do a
That's
PowerPoint
awesome.
thing on there, and it's been super eye-opening because they don't know. I've picked Ray Draper. No one who knew who Ray Draper was. And my
Mhm.
kid that introduced him found out things about Ray Draper I didn't even know because they
Yeah.
can find that on the internet if you look. Ray
Yeah.
Draper was the guy that played tuba with John Coltrane.
That's awesome.
It and it's something
Yeah.
that they would never know. They didn't know who Howard Johnson
Yeah.
was. That's really sad, but they know
Yeah.
now.
One of
Sometimes
the
they don't know who. Like I don't want to sound bad. They won't even know who Darren Parentoni is. That's really
yeah.
dumb
Yeah.
because he's not all over YouTube like you would think, Oisin
Yeah.
and, Roland and those guys are. But
Yeah.
it's got to be something where if we're not teaching the music history
Yeah.
of our players
What
ourselves, if I'm not doing it, they're not going to learn that music history class.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would imagine that within the next 10 years or so, you'd probably run into a lot of young euphonium players who don't know Brian Bowman, which is a travesty. And then,
Sad.
yeah, and then, which is an absolute travesty. And then, I mean, you'd probably run into a lot of tuba players, younger tuba players right now who might not know who Fritz Genzig is. Again,
They
travesty.
don't know who Arnold Jacobs is.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, there was someone that presented Arnold Jacobs and did it dang good. They did Ray
yeah,
Draper. I didn't know Ray Draper died of drug overdose. I didn't know
yeah,
that. They found that out. I mean, there's been some really, really great, and I'm going to rotate. I'm going to make a list of who's been presented, and I'm
yeah,
going to make sure we find new people all the time. I'm
yeah,
trying to find the old people now, like Cora Youngblood, Corson. I mean, no one. She was our
yeah,
hero of the euphonium, but no one knows of her. She
yeah.
was
I don't
probably
know
the
Corey.
first ever euphonium soloist and tuba soloist woman, but
That's
no, somehow
incredible.
or another she was overlooked. But her
Yeah.
nephew, thank you, that her nephew has done all this research, and he's not even a euphonium player.
Wow.
James Gregory is doing all this stuff on
Yeah.
Cora, and
Mhm.
man, it's amazing when you think about all the stuff that gets lost because it was that time where it was the women were the minorities or whatever. There
Yeah.
wasn't, so then it gets brushed under. Like, have you ever wondered, weren't there black composers writing when Mozart was writing?
Yeah.
There had to have been.
Yeah.
When I was in that jazz history class, it was a word I'd never thought of in that way, was the jazz canon, the
Yeah.
canon.
Yeah.
What's going on with our canon? The canon's being rocked right now.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I think that's good.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. Well, I
and
think Winston Marsalis was
the
someone.
balance that I think needs to be struck is we like a diversity in the canon that understands the medium. And that's not to say that there are composers that don't understand the medium in a majority right now. It's just that like I find that having the balance of having a deep understanding of like what the ensemble, like a wind ensemble, is really, really good at and how to get effects out of it. And that's very different than saying like, um, than necessarily glorifying some of the people of ill repute of the past. Wagner comes to mind when I bring that up. And one of the things that I've always appreciated studying about Wagner, even if I find him to be a very contentious person, is that he really knew how to get effects out of an orchestra. And so being able to analyze that in the class and have the conversation about like, okay, obviously a lot of his views about Jewish people are extraordinarily problematic. But
Yeah.
why is he so good? Like, what decisions did he make with Elsa's procession to the cathedral that make it such an effective piece of music? And what can we learn from this so that we can continue to make art of this quality while also being able to talk about the importance of acceptance of all people? I think that's a very, very efficient way
Yeah.
to teach and a very important way to teach.
Well, brushing stuff under the carpet and hiding things because it wasn't accepted back then is a problem.
Yeah.
But think about the beauty of the piece Bolero.
Yes.
And that's really one melody that goes forever and ever and ever, but how that transformed and grew,
Yes.
and based on how it traveled around the orchestra. I mean, that's fascinating. It's
Do
really
you,
one melody that just continues over and that same
there's
da 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 da.
There's a YouTube channel I think you'd really enjoy. It's called Listening In. It's a guy who does he's a
I'll look
composer
it up.
primarily, but he does music theory and musicology analyses of famous pieces. Two of my favorite videos that he's done. Um, there's one about how some wood painting, Hokusai wood paintings that Debussy encountered when he was studying in Rome informed his composition practices for La Mer and why the Grey Wave at Kanagawa, which is a Hokusai wood panel he probably found there, is the cover of that piece and is the original
Oh,
cover art
cool.
of that piece. There's another one on Bolero, and the really interesting thing about Bolero is the neurodegenerative condition that Ravel developed as he was aging causes the human brain to hear like really impetuous symmetry. And that piece is actually was written at a time where it was getting incredibly severe for him. And so it's really
Mm.
kind of a time capsule of what exactly was going on in his mind when he was experiencing that. And I think that that's so interesting.
Has he done any videos on like what was happening when Beethoven was getting deaf?
I don't know.
Wonder. Yeah,
I need to
we'll have
look
to
into
look
that.
that.
I think it'd be so. I'd really be interested to hear some of that.
Well, I was reading an article or something somewhere recently about someone that's doing research on all of the stuff that's false. Like
Mm,
how they like. I guess if you think about like I guess Tchaikovsky being gay or whatever, is how it's just barely mentioned,
yeah.
but like it was like kind of brushed under. People
Yeah.
want to celebrate the music, but not who he was. But there's people now that are actually trying to go back and dispel all the stuff that was hidden or the stuff that
Yeah.
was made up or covered over or whatever. There's,
Mm,
I don't know. We're taught, and when we think about even in grade school, the history of what our history of American history, all that, what someone else has decided to teach.
yes.
There's a lot of that argument now in the schools now, like they don't want people to start teaching about some of these other heroes because it's going
Yeah.
to make, Andrew Jackson or somebody else look like less of a hero. But there are more
Yeah.
than one hero, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Why do
absolutely.
we only study our presidents? What about the vice presidents? Or
Yeah.
I just,
I
you know
mean,
what I mean? Are the people that
there's
I don't know?
one thing that comes to mind is there I think it's the state of Oklahoma. I don't remember who it is. There's a state in the US that doesn't allow AP American history to be taught because they don't like how in some of the civil rights chapters the way that Dr. Martin Luther
It's teaching.
King's life is framed and how America is the antagonist and like the government are the
Oh, I know. There's a
antagonist.
lot of
And
that.
it's
Yeah.
like
There's
I mean,
yeah.
I I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King might have done more for the American citizen than almost anybody in the history of the
But they don't
country.
want us to know it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
it's
know, and that
devastating.
same kind of stuff there has obviously happened in our music history. Because, when you
Yes.
think about the classical composers that we study the most,
Hmm.
darn well there was more.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, even when you
absolutely.
think about the music that, music history only seems to go to a certain point,
Yeah.
and it goes to was it I can't think of the piece, all this stuff that's what glass, was it
Yeah, Philip Glass, Steve Reich,
Philip Glass, and
um,
then it stops
John
right around
Adams.
there, right?
Yeah,
And then there's the piece 4 minutes or whatever, and then nothing
Cage,
happens. Yeah,
Cage.
so I'm
Yeah.
thinking then it stops.
And
But what
the
about
the
all this stuff
irony
that
the irony is like the innovations of John Cage aren't discussed. They talk about 4 minutes 33 seconds, which is an
that's it?
and it's an important piece of music in defining that like we've reached an age where um I think you could conceivably describe art music as sound that has been organized. And the organization of a piece like 433 is the sounds that happen in the concert hall during the piece are the music to stretch the boundary of like what do we
And your
conceive as
thoughts,
music.
during that 4 minutes and 33
Yes.
seconds is the music.
And the journey that you go on in that time. But like I didn't learn about John Cage's chance-based operative music until like I bought a book of John Cage lectures and read them and heard about like
Yeah, why
this
are we
I
only learning one little
yeah, this
paragraph?
idea of like wouldn't it be really interesting if a form of a piece was decided by a coin flip? So you flip a coin 10 times, the A section is heads, the B section is tails. You flip it 10 times. The
Yeah.
results are the form of the piece. And then you have to decide whether B is going to be B or B prime, or A is
Well,
going
I
to be
got
A or A
very
prime.
infatuated with chants when I was in my
Yeah.
doctorate, and I wrote a piece at the beginning of this quintet I wrote is
Hmm.
all chants. And
Yeah.
eventually it comes together, and it all like it's got like a box that has this is the melody, this is the rhythm and the part the trumpet
Yeah.
plays, this is the and then how they enter. But you're right, it's very censored or filtered.
Yeah.
I think our music history classes, and I don't want to sound bad, spends too much time on Gregorian chant and some of that old stuff, some of the music
Yeah.
that's in the churches and stuff like that, where I think that should be shut down a little bit so we have more time to
Yeah.
go further. Because how could you teach the whole music history, even in a year worth two
Yeah.
semesters? But if you had a little less of this,
Yeah.
learning all that stuff that we're not really
Yeah.
doing anything
One
with, I
and
think,
also that like ethnomusicology is condensed to a single class.
ugh, yeah,
I think
that's
it's
wrong.
difficult. I think it's difficult in a bachelor's degree to obviously fit in everything. I mean, realistically, if you wanted to have like really interdisciplinary musicians teaching in a school, reasonably, I think you'd need 6 years. But like, it's difficult to do at a university.
Well, you're going to learn how to play the clarinet and the flute and the
Yeah,
oboe and the saxophone in one
yeah.
semester, right?
Yeah, it's nuts. And so like I think having a more interdisciplinary way of looking at that, and I think you could use jazz as a really interesting way to tie the classical music canon into world music, because in order to learn jazz really efficiently, um my friend Mike always talked about this. He did his master's degree in jazz trumpet at Purchase, and he talked about how when you go to like the master's seminar in jazz, you start by learning the slave music of like the slave folk music of Africans who were brought to the New World. And because that's the roots of jazz, in as much as like the roots of band is the military tradition and like knowing Sousa, and the roots of orchestral music is the church music of Central Europe. And so if you I'm of the opinion that if you want to have a really informed, good composition style in these mediums, like it's really important to know the roots and the development of it. And the thing that really sealed this conviction for me when I took graduate orchestration last year, I had a professor who hadn't taught the class in a while and took a very unconventional approach to it that I think is genius. But it's really only doable if you have two levels of orchestration. You have the one where you talk about like, here's clarinet, here's the clarinet handout. We're going to look at some excerpts for clarinet. This is how clarinet works. Write a piece for clarinet. Great. I think that class is super important, but that's orchestration level one. Orchestration and arranging level two, and reasonably, I think you could do a band orchestration level two, orchestra orchestration level two, etc. um, we got a like day one, we'd be given the piano reduction of a Bach cantata, and he'd say, orchestrate this for an ensemble Bach would have had access to. 2 weeks later, Mozart reduction. Orchestrate for this for an orchestra Mozart would have had access to.
Brilliant.
Followed by 5 lectures on how to write for natural horn. and
Yeah.
then and then and then here's a Beethoven reduction. And maybe it's 18 measures, but that amount of exercise and thinking about what would they have had access to. Okay, I'm going to go listen
Well,
to the recording. What are the
what were
idioms?
their instruments like?
Yeah, and what's this how are they pairing instruments together? Why is it so convenient to score triple winds in flute, oboe, clarinet in that triple octave split? Why why are the winds doing so little? Why is the brass so not involved? Being able to talk about the technological limitations and see the evolution of it. And then
Yeah,
we
the
went to
valves.
and then we go to Wagner and Brahms, and then and unfortunately we were really only able to spend lots of time in Central Europe because like the nature of the class. But when you're thinking about like the growth of the symphony orchestra, that's a
That's
lot
a
of where
way to
the
learn it.
yeah. And so by
One
the
way to
time
learn it.
we're at the end, we've covered Debussy, Respighi, loads of contemporary people. We had a couple of classes on film music and using the orchestra differently. And the final was, okay, write an original piece for orchestra that's less than 3 minutes. And
I
so
want to
you,
be in that. I want to be in your classes with you. You got great classes.
yeah, they're really
Golly.
fun. I'm really trying to take advantage of all the cool stuff we have going on here. And so like
Wow.
I found that being able to learn in like a very progressive fashion in that way really helped me understand exactly like the why of everything of the orchestra and really understand like the way the art form is supposed to move in as much as like I think some of the best method books like teach all of the principles right away and then they just get more detailed and a little more challenging as you go, but at no point does the lesson change. Just like the
Mm.
amount of stuff you have to do with it increases a little bit. The Bylin flexibility studies comes to mind. I think that's the best written methods book because it's so simple at the beginning. It's just like octaves and fifths in whole notes.
I
And
could
then you
never understand the harmonics on that, how that, I bombed that every time when you had to talk about what note was going to come out with that. Because we only probably spent 2 weeks or a week on how that worked, and then you get tested on it. But yeah.
yeah.
Wow, that sounds like great classes. There was a class at Michigan State when I was there I wanted to take, but I did my doctorate in like 20 months. I was only there 4 semesters, but
Whoa.
it was called Symbiosis, and it was a composition class where to be in that class, you had to get a partner to sign up for it with you. So like
Mhm.
me, it would be dumb to get a euphonium player because I know about, it, but to
Yeah.
seek harp or to
Yeah.
seek piano, I should have gotten a pianist
Yeah.
or a percussionist, and you get something to partner with them, and then you write a piece for that person, and
Yeah.
you work together on what they
Yeah.
teach you what it can and can't do, and then I would have loved that class.
Yeah, I've tried to be the kind of performer and the kind of composer where like my life is just that way. Where like I'm writing music for my friends all the time and my friends are writing
Me
music for
too.
me because a rising tide raises all boats. And so like we get a lot of each other, a lot of opportunity to really work on like the guts of what works and what doesn't for our instrument. And then we're getting interesting new literature that fits the horn, which is great. I one of
Yeah.
my recitals last year was undergraduate composers at University of Illinois, and I commissioned a bunch of people, and I premiered all of this work. And I mean, some of
Neat.
it was like the toughest music I've ever learned in my whole life, but it was really cool to be able
Be
to
careful what
say,
you ask for, right?
yeah, and well, that's a really funny thing. Like, I made sure I had a sit down meeting with all of them, and I outlined like this is kind of what euphonium can do. This is the range I would write it for. This is what I would stay away from, to try to
Do
really
you think
outline
any of their
stuff.
music will live on? Do you think any of it would live on? Have
Um,
they published any of it? I mean,
so I mean, a lot of these cats are pretty young. Like some of them aren't even like might have just turned 21. They've got a long way to
yeah.
go. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of their career, like I'm not worried. But the thing I think that was most significant from this project was the idea of like, oh, I can write a substantial piece for euphonium, and there's a good player at my school who will make sure it gets recorded for me.
Yep.
And having,
That's important.
if nothing else, then the value of something for their portfolio that's good, and then the nostalgic value of um like this this was somebody took a chance on me early, and it like they made sure that even if they couldn't give me a lot, they gave me something that was important and powerful and useful. I mean, think it keeps them excited about continuing to write for instruments like euphonium going forward. And honestly, especially with like how efficient it is to get interesting chamber groups together. Like, I think a call for scores model going forward is a really effective way to get like euphonium more involved in chamber music. Because if you have a group like, do you know the Load Bang Ensemble? They're run out of the Northeast, I think New York. Their ensemble is very eclectic. It's trombone, trumpet, bass clarinet, and baritone voice, and they only do
Cool.
music originally written for them. And they have a summer festival that they hold that they invite composers to, and they do call for scores pretty regularly, I think. But the idea is like, I think the application fee when they do a call for scores is $25 to $50, so it's nothing super huge. But like when all of that money that goes into it becomes money for the quintet, obviously, to do stuff with, but then the prize money for the commission. So you're able to give composers something back when they've submitted pieces, and then maybe you have a piece that maybe didn't make the honorable mentions list, or maybe that's what you have the honorable mentions list for, which I think honorable mention lists are super underrated, because like you're really only helping people if you say like, okay, we're only giving cash prizes to numbers 1, 2, and 3, but like these 5 that made it were so cool and we
Oh,
really
I
liked
know.
them, and like
I judge a lot of
we
competitions
wanted to
like that for
say like this is an honorable
sure.
mention, and that's and like it's a no cost way of giving something value back, because somebody can list like honorable mention
They
at
were
this
the honorable
competition
mention.
on a resume.
I agree. I judge competitions often with composition, and there it's hard to pick a winner from some of that stuff. Sometimes it's easier, but what's good music and what's not? What's good art? What's not good art? I mean, normally you can pick something based on, is this going to work on our instrument? Sometimes stuff is written where it's
Yeah.
just not effective, or I don't know. But what is good? What's not good? I mean, it's really hard to say. I think the honorable mention is very important. Having more than one winner, I think, is important too, because it's if you want people to write more music. I've been on these committees where you commission a composer to write something, like for instance for the Women's Brass Conference, to write something for the Monarch Brass, which
Yeah.
is the ladies' version of Summit Brass. And you can get a reputable composer and they write something for our group. They have no clue what they're doing,
Yeah.
and we've just paid this person a lot of money to write this. Or you can do a call for scores, pick your winners and give prizes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think
And
the
then you
call for scores
discover a new
model is the
composer.
way. And
You discover a new composer. You get more pieces to pick. You build a repertoire. I don't know. I just feel
and
like commissioning one person that happened to do all this stuff. We never get
mhm.
anything super great from that.
And
Seldom.
one of the things that's nice about a call for scores model is you can list in the criteria like what your instrument is good at. Like this is what the load bang does. They have like a one sheet of everything the ensemble, like the ranges, the things that's good at, things to stay away from, as like kind of a rubric of like, if you want to have like a good chance at winning, you should probably think about these things. But it's not
Yeah,
like necessarily rules for competition, because obviously if you broke them in a really interesting way, like you're probably going to win because you broke all the rules in a really interesting way, and that's the art of it. And if it's a worthy competition, they're going to care about the music first. But having all these references of like things to stay away from, things that really work for the horn, I think is a really great model going forward. And I
I
think,
agree.
and that's kind of the idea with this project, is having a one sheet that I can then give to people that are saying, or maybe not a one sheet, but like a document that I can distribute to people, the lecture recital that goes with it, of like, this is euphonium, this is how it works, and like there's so much to offer here that's being unutilized. And quite frankly, like, what does it say to some of our music students, especially when you can major in euphonium at basically every American music school, let alone the major ones, but that there are major universities in the US that have exclusively euphonium studios, and they don't even get a paragraph in the orchestration textbook.
It's a shame. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I've argued that. I asked one of my former university. Well, actually, I asked my alma mater, UCF, why do you offer this degree if you don't value it? When I was an adjunct there, I was asking for like, could they buy a new tuba for the school or whatever,
Yeah.
or can I have a budget of money to buy a new, rep for the ensemble? And
Yeah.
they were crying poor mouth. I'm like, well, why do you even offer this degree if you're
Yeah.
not going to respect it? And you won't give the teacher who's an adjunct, who's not full
Yeah.
time, some money to help these kids. I'm only here one day a week. Look like you care. It's
Yeah.
it's a hot mess. Like I said, it's in other countries they have baritone degrees,
Yeah.
baritone horn,
Yeah.
and they have euphonium. They probably have alto horn or tenor horn degrees.
Yeah.
Here we look like I don't know. It's like the euphonium is the wicked stepchild. It's like
Yeah.
I'm lucky to have my teaching job that I have as someone who has all three of my degrees in euphonium performance. I'm
Yeah.
dang lucky, and it's probably because I was of all the things I had done, before I applied for this job. I was late coming into academia because I worked, theme park musician. That's where I did a lot of my arranging and stuff when I
Yeah.
was
Disney.
there. And I did that, and then I did a lot of freelance stuff for a long time with teaching private students. So that really padded my experiences of, the teaching from beginners to adults. But when you think about it, I mean, I'm dang lucky to have the job I have. I mean,
Yeah.
I was applying for some other jobs that was looking for tuba and euphonium, but tuba preferred.
Yeah.
And I know I was overqualified for some of those, but there's someone like me that wants to have a dang tubist.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be the tuba teaching euphonium? Why can't the euphonium teach the tuba? I mean, that's what I do here. My
Yeah.
tuba students win awards and prizes and stuff like that all over
Yeah.
the place.
Certainly.
But it's just that it's that mold we're talking about where everyone thinks it's supposed to be this, and they write the euphonium, and this is what we do. Well, this is what we could have as our professors. It's really it's music is moving in a very different way, and I think
Yeah.
like someone like you're very smart to have that composition in the
Thanks.
theory side of things because
Yeah.
you're going to be super valuable. Versus
Thanks.
my students now that want to do euphonium degrees, I'm like, I feel scared for you.
Yeah. So having taken such a break between the bachelor's and the master's degree, like I applied for composition at a lot of schools and euphonium at a lot of schools with the plan of like I've got to go whichever route just gets me funded because getting back to school was the most important thing for me. And it happened to be euphonium and being able to study. Well, it's a very interesting situation for me because like my teacher now, I knew him for about 6 years before studying my master's degree as my friend Scott Teggy, who runs the Gaudete Brass Quintet or contributes to running the Gaudete Brass Quintet. And now it's like, oh, well, this is kind of funky. Like Scott's my teacher. But it's funny how that works that way. But like just being able to get into music school and getting access to some of the resources that it lends you and being able to take classes with the world-class composers that teach you, even if like for a while I wasn't directly in the composition studio, set me up to then apply for a DMA in composition or and be able to just write better. And if we're looking to take euphonium in a more different direction, like having a good teacher in euphonium is um, accessible. I've yet to meet euphonium players who don't want to talk about euphonium and share what the euphonium can do. So I don't think there's a shortage in teachers, but we need some different creativity in order to really take the horn in a new direction and give it the stage and the spotlight that I think it deserves.
Don't be afraid to break the mold.
Yeah, and that's the idea for this project is a concerto that pushes the euphonium outside of where it's supposed to go. Because like even within the new concerti that are coming out right now, where the euphonium is being asked to do all kinds of wild and crazy things, the technical and lyrical sides of the instrument are being pushed, but at no point has I think like a euphonium player, as a euphonium player, I've not encountered a new concerto where I've been like, wow, euphonium can sound like that. It's the question or the statement I usually come away with